record. And I'm just going to start sharing us onto Facebook, because I will keep an eye on Facebook once we're up and running, because I think quite a few people are signing on to the Facebook. Sometimes they ask for the Zoom link, sometimes they don't. So we will get ourselves organised. We're nearly there. Do say hello to each other while I'm faffing around, folks.
Hello.
So good. Right. We are. We've got someone else joining us. My friend Julie.
Hello, Julie.
Oh, your sister's got a little baba. That picture of your sister with the little baba, James.
Is my nephew joining us?
I don't know. Is your nephew joining us, Anna?
He's been dragged up to bed.
Oh no. All right. So
on Facebook.
He can't go on Facebook.
No, I'm just trying to share the link to this event on Facebook, which is I think that's where my picture came up as well.
Oh right. Oh yeah. Well, we'll give it another minute or two, because there are a couple more people who are usually signing in. Anyway, firstly, a thank you to James for fitting us in amongst his very busy schedule. Have you stopped yet, James? Have you been on the go all day?
No, it's been a quiet day today. I went to the Albert Dock for lunch with my son, who's over from Ireland with me. We'd hope to make it tasting
freedom, isn't he?
It is tasting freedom. We planned on a cultural day, but I hadn't banked on all the museums being closed on.
Oh, you're kidding? Oh, is that the old Monday closing syndrome?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
Anyway, where do you live in Ireland, James? Sorry, you're going to kick off, Tony.
Yeah, no, James.
I live in County Laois.
In Laois,
in the Midlands.
Right.
It's near the Curragh race course.
Oh, right.
It's big horse riding country.
Yeah.
Now, during tonight's proceedings, we're going to play just a little snippet of music every so often, James. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I thought you might recognise this one.
Say, love me, leave me, let me be lonely. You won't leave me, but I love you only. I'd rather be lonely than happy with somebody else.
You've got the Outsiders soundtrack, Tony. Very good.
Time is my time for just reminiscing, regretting instead of forgetting with somebody else. There'll be no one unless that someone is you. I intend to be independently blue. Say, I want your love, don't want to borrow. Have it today to give back tomorrow.
So, James, are you personally a fan of Nina Simone, or is it your mum and dad who are fans of Nina Simone?
No, I'm a fan of Nina Simone.
Good man. My mum and dad were big fans, so I grew up listening to Cat Stevens, Nina Simone, the Mamas and the Papas. But one of the things which we'll be touching on in a minute is music is a big part of this book, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and David Nichols, a writer I very much admire. He creates Spotify playlists to his books, and it's something I should probably do.
I think you definitely should. Well, I mean, that's sort of what I've tried to do in the background of when you start talking in a minute, I've lined up an Echo and the Bunnyman song, and thingy. My friend George is having a problem getting on. Well, Julie, he'll just have to come and stare over your shoulder, won't he? You're on mute.
I'll go and sort him out. He obviously needs tech support. Do excuse me.
Don't worry. Would you go and nudge him into life and we'll get started?
Good evening, Tony. Good evening, everyone.
Hello, and evening, Mr. Corbett Senior.
Evening, Mr. Corbett.
He's downstairs then, James, and you're upstairs, yeah.
Yeah, no,
Morning. One
It's
say
like
morning.
it's like University Challenge, isn't it? Your picture is above your dad's picture on my screen. I don't know what it's like on yours. Oh, he's moved. He's gone over there now. Hey. So anyway, welcome in one and all. We are live on Facebook. Hopefully anyone on Facebook can see us. I will check in a minute. We're recording it and the audio goes out 7 o'clock Thursday evening on Access Northwest Radio. Just ask Alexa and you will find us, or any of the other ways that you find local radio. And it will be up on YouTube later as well. So hopefully, if people are missing it now, you can all nudge them towards watching this later. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome my friend James to this little chat. About December time, my friend George, who's just signed in there, there's Julie, has run from that screen above to that screen below and signed him in. Yeah, technology, old people, they can't do it, can they, George?
Absolutely not. Not a hope in hell.
So no, George and I went to school together, and around Christmas time, he said to me, "Why don't we start like a Monday night?" Well, it didn't have to be Monday night. We just ended up with Monday night. You know, where we get an author, or we chat about books, or we chat about music and poetry, and we've been going strong, you know, since Christmas really. But as James will tell you in a minute, James and I go way back, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking earlier, it's really nice because this is the first event that I've done with this book, because Tony was there right at the start. When I was 16 or 17, I turned up at Pritchard's in Formby with a tape recorder because they had the great man Neville Southall signing books, and Neville gave me an interview, and that became my first ever piece of paid journalism. And Tony often reminds me of it because his daughter was there and she was a baby, and now here we are a quarter of a century later, and Tony's a grandfather, and I'm a has-been journalist.
Oh no, you're not. You're back into journalism at the moment, aren't you? You've gone back into writing, you know, journalism. Anyway, the main reason we're here, which, you know, hopefully people will bear with us, because doing it on Zoom's great, but you do lack that ability to quite hear what anyone else is saying. But James is over from Ireland to promote his absolutely wonderful book. Oh, probably can't see it on my screen because it blends in the background. But it's called The Outsiders. It starts with a prologue that's set in the current day, and then we are whisked back to when James and I went to university in the 80s, basically. Well, that seems to be what it feels like to me. So we go back to Liverpool in 1981, and Liverpool in 1981 was quite a different place than it is now. You know, for starters, the other Nina Simone song I might play later is, you know, it's called Don't Smoke in Bed. And I think everyone in this book seems to be surrounded by smoke all the way through the first, certainly part one anyway. But James, just now that we've got more people joining in, are you going to read a little bit from the book just to start us off? Are you going to read the prologue, or have you got another little bit that you want to read?
I'll read something from the not the prologue, the first chapter, I think, which is set in 1981. Okay, here we go. You didn't become a Liverpudlian simply by living there. You could be from the city but not of it. Call it home but never really belong. Other cities chewed you up and then spat you out, but Liverpool was different. It would turn up its nose and shrug you off with an ambivalence so damning that it made it feel as though you had never fallen under its contemptuous glare. Everybody spoke of the sense of community, but once away from the vicinity of family, friends and neighbours and out into the wider city, you were nobody. Because of the intra-city apartheid that seemed to rear its head in every loose encounter, the whole "I'm more local than you" swagger, everybody was, in their way, an outsider. These things kept coming back to Paul as he made the journey from the suburban outlands and into the heart of the city, where he was meeting friends for a night out. In a vapid summer, the chance to see Echo and the Bunnyman at the university was one of the few fixtures in his calendar. It was early evening, and men in suits were disembarking from the Southport train to go home to their wives and children, their squares of garden and the last of the day's sun. Liverpool had broiled again under clear skies and a high sun. Beyond the city, the expanse of the Irish Sea lay flat, brown and benevolent, the coastal breeze, which usually cooled it on such days, conspicuous by its very absence. The air was still and dense. Liverpool also sweated under the gaze of 100 television cameras as a media frenzy descended upon the city. Liverpool 8, the inner city district that incorporated Toxteth, had exploded into violence after local residents took an aggressive stand against police brutality. Overnight, it became a latter-day Saigon as journalists filled its streets and ran with the rioters. Buildings burned, vehicles were overturned and set alight, while youths hacked away at the wreckages, creating a makeshift arsenal of bricks and masonry. Social commentators lined up to condemn the moral degradation that bred the violence, while police deflected accusations of brutality by inviting camera crews into local hospitals, where entire wards were handed over to bruised bobbies. One man was dead, hundreds of others injured. Bishops appealed for calm, community leaders claimed the battles were over. For the rest of the city, however, life carried on as normal. People went to work, women shopped and children played. Concerned relatives telephoned from afar to check up on family. But in a city of suburbs, Toxteth's riots were a TV phenomenon for most people. Remote, somewhere else.
Thank you very much. So just before I ask you a couple of questions myself, and then obviously anyone else is welcome to do so, this seemed like a good idea. So basically, the first time we meet most of the main characters is at a sweaty Echo and the Bunnyman gig at the Mountford Hall at Liverpool Uni. I may even have been there, although I think this is, I went in 84, so this was a couple of years before I started hitting the nightclub scene. But I have seen Echo and the Bunnymen a couple of times, and I'm assuming you are personally a fan. You haven't just written them in out of them being a big Liverpool band.
No, I'm a fan.
Yeah,
and, I Echo and the Bunnymen were before my time, but I saw Ian McCulloch in various successor bands.
Yeah,
in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they reformed. I mean, I saw them. They played at the Philharmonic Halls a couple of years ago, and with I think the original lineup certainly had Will Sargent on guitar. In fact, Andrew and David, who are guests tonight, they're local musicians as well as book lovers. So, I mean, Andrew may even know Ian McCulloch. Is that Andrew? Do you?
I do, unfortunately, or fortunately. I've got to give away something of my personal life here. So I command your respect, I hope. In 1997, I married, 1998, I married a lady called Ellen. And I met her in 1996. And what I didn't know is Ellen's sister, Arlene, was going out with Ian McCulloch's brother, Peter. So whenever I went to their house, which was opposite Broad Green Hospital, I go in and there'd be this guy sitting in the sunroom. And they'd say, "Oh, Ian's sitting in there." Like, Ian who? Oh, Ian McCulloch. Ian McCulloch. And I think he just had a renaissance. He'd had an album out and a single called Nothing Lasts Forever. And so I go in there and he's actually quite morose. And he goes, "I suppose you want to talk to me." I said, "Well, we're just saying hello." "Okay, you've said hello. Where are you going?" You had problems, Ian. And then there was the New Year's Eve where he just used to sit around. So I was kind of related to him by marriage for a time. But, it's funny. I met him years later at the Lava Aid concert. And, he never fails to give bad value You know, in terms of his music, obviously that's what represents him better. But in terms of his personal exploits, maybe not. You know, but I do know one thing. One, he is the biggest ABBA fan you'll ever meet. Seriously, this is years before.
This is going out for public listening, you know, Andy.
No, it's okay. I can live with it. But he's the biggest ABBA fan you've ever met. And he also had a thing about collecting certain items. He also got in trouble with the museums, arts and galleries in Liverpool. Do you remember there was a single called A Promise by Echo and the Bunnymen? It was in between Heaven Up Here and...
Which we just played, I think.
Yeah, and the next album, which was Porcupine. And A Promise was meant to feature on the cover a famous painting. I can't remember who painted it. I don't know.
Not Stuart Sutcliffe, because that crops up in your book, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, you're thinking of Epstein Hamburger. But no, he actually had a thing about this painting, and he wanted to use it on the sleeve of a record. And what happened was that Bill Drummond, who represented the Bunnymen at the time, approached the Museum Arts and Galleries. They approached the estate of the painter, and they went, no. And so he didn't use it for the cover of The Promise. But in the June of 1982, they issued a single called The Back of Love. And The Back of Love featured the painting of The Promise, which is a boy and girl meeting under the bough of a tree. So, you know, you're going to go and find out if you got that in your record collections now.
Well, it's funny because the description of that painting sort of mirrors what goes on in this book a little bit, doesn't it? With Paul, the main protagonist of the start of the book, and he becomes embroiled with a previously famous poet. Now, I'm going to make James pronounce a name before I make a mess of pronouncing a name. So, how do you pronounce the poet's name, James?
Nadja.
Nadja. Yeah, I thought it would be shortened, you know, because when you read it, obviously, you know, it's Nadazadja, and you're thinking, no, it's got to be pronounced differently than that. But basically, she's a past famous poet who left Austria. You had to flee Austria, when the Nazis took over Vienna and everything, and has settled in Liverpool. And has sort of lived through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, quite a bohemian lifestyle, James, really.
Yes, yeah, she represents something very different to what Paul, the protagonist, knows, and she's quite exotic and mysterious, and she'd once been very famous, but has sort of fallen out of fashion, and there's a hint of disgrace there as well, and he unravels some of that, but he doesn't unravel her past. That remains a mystery throughout most of the book, and it's only many years later that he actually found out what had happened to her during the war, and why she chose to be so elusive about it.
I mean, the fascinating thing about a book like this is because the history that you've chosen is sort of still quite current. I mean, it's a period that I lived through. I mean, certainly, I think everybody, you know, who's with us tonight was alive when this period was going on. We've all got slight memories of what was real and what wasn't real. Now, as an author and indeed a journalist, how much did you have to go and check any of your things like dates of the records you use and things like that, or did you just naturally know the answers?
Well, I mean, let me say something before I answer your question. You talk about living through these things. There's one of the media topics that it deals with as part of the backdrop is the Hillsborough disaster and the scandals that happened later with the police changing witness statements and covering up. And it's only in the week before publication that another trial has collapsed. And this is actually predicted in the book. There's actually a trial of somebody who changes police statements. And some of the stuff that was coming out in the press, it might have come from the pages of my book, which is of course all fiction, but it just goes to show how Liverpool's history is still part of, things that have happened in the 1980s are still, we're still trying to resolve today. And my fictionalized version of what happened was actually just as bad as what's happened in real life in the last 7 or 10 days or so. Going back to your question, yeah, I mean, it's all very, very methodically researched. I'm a history graduate and trained as a historian, and my father's a history teacher, so that's very much part of my my makeup and my set of skills. And of course, I've written plenty of non-fiction books before, which deal with history, and I've edited them as well. I was the editor of a book called There She Goes about Liverpool in the 1980s.
I remember that book, actually.
Yeah, it's a terrific book written by another Crosby author, Simon Hughes.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, well, I think it's the Laws and that sort of period, isn't it? It's
yeah, it's called Liverpool Liverpool in the 1980s, the long decade. It goes from 1979 and the arrival of Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister, and goes up to 1990.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got quite a little bit of an undercurrent of that type of politics at the start of this book. I mean, we're instantly thrown into the Toxteth riots pretty much at the start of the book, aren't we?
Yes, we are. But what I wanted to show with that is that it was very much a phenomenon that was part of the city, a certain geographical part of the city, and that you could live through that in Liverpool and never be confronted with it. And the characters sort of stumble across the riots in one section of the book, and they're shocked not so much by the violence but by being confronted by a kind of very black poverty that their sort of relatively privileged white backgrounds hadn't known before. And this is one of the ideas behind the book, that you can be from Liverpool but never really know it. There's all these pockets and villages in the city that are interconnected, but you might not know them at all.
Well, I think that's very true, because I mean, you and I and most of us are probably from the outer part of Liverpool, the suburbs. I mean, we're Crosby based, in relative terms. We're only 4 or 5 miles away from Liverpool, but it's a long way if you're not connected to what goes on in the areas in the inner city. You've got the train line. I think you used the train line a few times, and buses and things like that, to describe where characters are coming from, where they're going to. And I mean, I remember periods like this, but there's a lot of drinking goes on in the early parts of the book, isn't there?
Well, there's a lot of drinking that goes on in Liverpool, full stop.
Yeah. There's a lovely line about someone drinking pints of mild in one of the. You name check quite a few pubs that I think most of them are still there. The Carnarvon Castle and the Grapes and a few others. And you've got the twirlies, the people who turn up early and are they allowed in or not?
Yeah.
But when you were writing the book, you've actually brought in quite a few characters that are genuinely real people, even if they're only anecdotal. Like the fellow that ran Eric's is an early character, isn't he?
Yes, Roger Eagle is mentioned, and Beryl Bainbridge.
Emlyn Hughes crops up in a bathroom in an apron or something, doesn't he?
Yeah, but why not? The Beatles always alluded to famous and real people, and in their work and the artwork on their things. So, why not name check a few people? Because it makes it very real within the book.
So, I mean, how did you decide what type of personality to give Nadja? When did you decide to make it a poet? I mean, when did that come into your processing of creating this enigmatic bohemian, past person?
So the book was a long time in coming. I sort of hint at that in the acknowledgements, and little tiny bits of it date back from when I was at university 20 years ago. And I had had another stab at writing the novel when I first became a father, and I sort of had this very noble but naive idea that I was going to look after my son, who's going to sleep in a pram in the corner, and I'd write great novels. And it didn't quite work out that way. He's now 13 and a half.
And it's taken you that long to write the book.
Yeah, but what I did do, I was, I always had these ideas, and I wrote probably 100,000 words. And, the actual real process of writing the book started in mid-2018, where I culled an awful lot of that, but I had about 15 chapters, and then I set out a plan to write the rest of it. But the one thing that I had was Nadia, who was just this really brilliant and idiosyncratic character, and a bit elusive and a bit glamorous. And so she was very interesting. The idea for her came from there was a literary scandal in the early noughties. There was a French author called Benjamin Wilkomowski, who wrote this fantastic sort of novel stroke memoir based on his experiences in I think it was the Warsaw Ghetto during the Second World War, and I think it won a big literary prize in France, and then it was widely translated. I've got the English book. And then somebody did a bit of digging and found out that it was a complete work of fraud. It was fiction. Wilkomowski wasn't Jewish. He wasn't Polish, and he just invented this all. So the original idea was that Nadia would be, a Holocaust survivor, but potentially she'd faked her story, and that's sort of the hook that I leave. Has she lied about her past? Why is she so elusive about it? And she hasn't. The actual truth about what's happened to her during the war is far more terrible and far more extraordinary than I think anybody could imagine. And when I showed drafts of it to people, people with a deep understanding, like my dad, who worked for the Holocaust Education Trust, he actually said, did these things actually happen during the war? And, yes, they did, because the Holocaust is the greatest and most extraordinary crime of all. And she survived it, but she had to go through terrible suffering and terrible privations to do so. And this is ultimately uncovered within the story.
I mean, the thing I've found fascinating in reading the book is that it's written with a real thriller pace, but actually it's a lot of accounts of people who you get little bits of them, but obviously Paul, is the driving force that passes through the book, and he changes quite a lot. I mean, when we first meet him, he's just fallen in love with one of Nadia's daughters. He tries borscht for the first time, and he's off to university, and the world's going to be his oyster. And then we meet him, taking photographs of mutilated bodies out in in the Middle East, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he goes on quite a journey. And obviously, because I've had a career in journalism, lots of people have said to me, is Paul you, etc., etc. No, he's not. He's far more passive in many ways than I am. There's little bits that I've drawn upon within his character and within his experiences.
Well, having to write sober was the thing that struck me. He's got a friend, an American friend, hasn't he? And he's got to write his article like 900 words in 4 hours, is it, or something like that? Yeah. And his mate says, cup of tea, don't you want something else? And he goes, no, maybe later. How true is that when you were a journalist? Did you,
that's very true. Trying to write stories after long lunches. That's very true. I mean, luckily enough, in some ways, I've never witnessed what he does as a war correspondent, and a lot of my work's quite prosaic in that field. But yeah, like I've been to the Middle East and reported from there. And I suppose that's one of the things that I've drawn from the book. And Paul goes to Cambridge University. I went to London School of Economics, but many of the things that he encounters I did too. You know, people thought that you were from. I mean, you spoke to some of the people when I went to LSC in the late 90s. You'd have thought I'd been plucked from siege era Sarajevo.
Yeah.
Rather than Liverpool,
Well, I mean, there's the wonderful thing where they all get their exam results, and he's got his A's and goes to Cambridge, and his poor mate who wanted to go to Oxford and needed to get A's somehow has a bit of fall from grace, and I think a bottle of Bushmills ends up inside him in one night, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah. That's true. And yeah, I mean, look, when I went to school, there were all those sort of little rivalries and bits of Machiavellianism that went on. Although nobody was quite as wicked and Machiavellian as his so-called best friend turns out to be.
Yeah. I mean, you've used Liverpool very cleverly, at the start of the story, and you come back to Liverpool. Did you ever think of not setting in Liverpool, or was it always going to be set in Liverpool?
No, I mean, I feel quite strongly about this actually. And I mean, we talked about it last week when we had a coffee. I think it's really extraordinary that Liverpool is at the heart of so many things culturally in this country. And we saw it again last night. There's this Jimmy McGovern thing on TV. You have amazing writers, but they tend to be for TV programs. You have amazing musicians. As a city, we've had more #1 hits than anywhere else in the world. In Liverpool, it's become a home for film. There's incredible world-class museums and art galleries. It really adds to the cultural life of Britain in ways that, frankly, nowhere else outside London does. But it's been underrepresented in literature. And what I wanted to do was to write a great Liverpool novel, and Liverpool is very much part of it. It's like a multi-layered canvas on which I paint what is, in essence, a love story and a mystery.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the one thing that does shine through is the connection to all of the areas that you take us to in Liverpool. You've got them going over to Parkgate and, breaking into the Botanic Gardens, and, and there's the scene where Sarah takes Paul on a photographic odyssey, trying to take photos of bad things that were going on in and around the city. And we meet a lovely little cameo character called Bonkers.
Yes.
Where did he come from, dare we ask?
Oh, he's just an invention. I mean, I love documentary photography, and there's a great Liverpool publisher called Bluecoat Press.
Oh yeah, Colin Wilkinson. Yeah,
they do fantastic books. People like Tish Murta and
Shonbra Hardman.
Yeah, I think he's even done Don McCullum, who's got an exhibition at the Tate at the moment. So yeah, I quite often pick out pictures from his books and imagine those in real life.
Yeah, I can imagine it. I mean, it's a girl of about 18 or so wandering around Liverpool with a Leica camera, isn't it?
Yeah. Although look, I must admit I did that myself when I was a student for an art project. I went around.
But hold on, we've got a couple more people joining us, so we'll just let them slide in, and then what we'll do while they're entering the room is we're just going to have a very quick bit of another bit of music that sets the scene for early on in the book.
Sometimes I feel I've got to run away. I've got to get away from the pain you drive into the heart of me. The love we share seems to go nowhere, and I've lost my light, for I toss and turn. I can't sleep at night.
And I think love is quite a strong part of this story throughout. I mean, you've got, you know, the first love that Paul and Sarah go through, and then obviously you've got all the alleged or where they real affairs that Nadja had throughout her life. You know, but you don't make that part of the story romantic in a way. It's less than, well, it's not slushy is the word I'm trying to fish for. So, you know, how did you find writing kissing and, you know, love scenes? How did that sit with you?
With a great fear that I'd win the oldies.
The Alan Titchmarsh
prize. Look, you can. I always think the best films and TV series sort of hint at love scenes. You know, you don't need to have great animatical descriptions. And if I wanted to do that, maybe I'd be a biological writer.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, I mean, the tenderness in certainly, you know, with Paul and Sarah getting to know each other and you know, being able to express themselves. I mean, that's all written beautifully. You know, it's very realistically written, as it is when you meet, you know, the first person that you fall in love with, and you want to spend, you know, all your time with them and always kissing them and, you know, desperate to be with them. And he's quite lucky in a way, because obviously Nadja sort of lets both her daughters pretty much do what they want, doesn't she? Really, you know, she lives upstairs in the artist's garret almost, doesn't she? Really,
it's really fantastic to have a mother-in-law like that when you're 18.
Yeah, definitely. And the parties she throws. I mean, you've got that wonderful character who tries to chat virtually everyone up. The gay chap who comes
Julian.
to the party, Julian. Yeah.
Look, I in my London life, I did know people like that, and I mean, the guy who became my best man when I got married, his mother was a very famous publisher, and you know, she wasn't like Nadja at all in terms of personality, but you go to their house, and you know, they had this lovely townhouse overlooking a park in West London. And you know, there'd always be a bottle of wine open, and there'd always be amazing food that you just help yourself to. And you know, you'd be called in at 9 o'clock, and there'd be a supper on the table, and there'd be 3 or 4 really interesting people. I mean, I went there for Easter lunch one week, and who should be there but Douglas Adams?
You're very lucky.
Who she published. It was shortly before he passed away.
Yeah.
So I did encounter sort of scenarios a little bit like that, and lots of very, very colourful people.
Well, you've got Ted Hughes pops up as a guest almost in the background in this, haven't you?
Who? Sorry.
Ted Hughes.
Ted Hughes. Yeah. Well, this is one of Nadja's fantasies that she so it's not Ted Hughes, it's T.S. Eliot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's one of her fantasies that she was T.S. Eliot's protege, and it just adds to this sort of uncertainty about her. You know, why would she make these things up when she's actually really famous in her own right?
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing also, just so people know, certainly in the early 80s, I mean, all of the little things like Paul goes to the library to do some research on Nadja when he finds out that she's sort of meant to be famous, and you've got this wonderful scene where the librarian sort of gives him half the story. I mean, these days you'd just Google it, wouldn't you, and it would all fall into place pretty much instantly. But he's got to wait like a week to get part 2 of the press cuttings, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's right, and that's one of the things that the editor questioned me about, and I couldn't actually believe that they'd asked this, because even when I was going to libraries in the 90s, when I was studying at school and university.
Microfiche?
Yeah, microfiche. I mean, I was still using that 15, 16 years ago. You know, you had to do that. You had to do the research. And the librarians did have proper archivists where they would collate files on the great and good of a city and a community, which is what Paul does, and it's how he unravels a little bit of Nadja's background.
Well, there's a very damning press report of something that may or may not have happened with a younger man, isn't there? Early on in the in the discovery chain, and that bubbles along, throughout, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it sort of draws upon tabloid hysteria, particularly with regards to people of foreign origins. So she's accused of seducing somebody that she was mentoring, a 15-year-old, and it's turned around that she's a racy German poet, even though she's not German, and the tabloids give her a bashing, and of course all her posh neighbours in South Liverpool, they wouldn't, they couldn't possibly read the news of the world, but they're all very aware of this, and it sort of adds to the sense of disgrace about her, and she sort of becomes a little bit untouchable.
And the other thing later on in the book is that you've had to sort of pick periods to move the story forwards. Otherwise, it would have been just a long, slow book. I mean, it sounds like you already had that worked out, that you had periods that worked for telling the story, where the gaps come 8 years apart and so on.
Yeah, that's right. So the first, just to explain, the book is split into 5 sections, and the first and the longest section is set in Liverpool in 1981 against the backdrop of the Toxteth riots, and then we jump forward 8 years to 1989, where we find Paul as a reporter, and it sort of recaps on where he's been at until then, and he's confronted by a very serious manipulation of the truth, and he decides that he's spent so long trying to tell other people's stories that he doesn't know. He needs to spend a bit more time looking into his own past and those people that he cares about. And so it's quite a long gestation period. And then we cut back to, in part 3, we cut back to Nadia, and we hear Nadia's story during the Second World War. And then we jump forward again, and there's a section that goes basically from 1993 to the present day, and it sort of jumps forward where he's trying to verify whether what she's told him is actually true, and it also tells the stories of the other characters that we meet in the first part of the book. So Sarah, his lost love, Sarah's sister Julia, and Christopher, who is his ostracized best friend. And then in the final section of the book, we learn what happened to Sarah, who's been missing since 1981, and it tells her story and brings it up to the current day. And hopefully, there's I won't give away the ending, but hopefully,
no, you should never do that.
hopefully, the ending does them all justice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think obviously whenever someone is asked to talk about themselves and what they've done, it's quite draining, really. So I think it'd be nice now if everyone can unmute themselves, and it can be a general question or a question about writing or research, really. We'll start with you, Zoe, if there's something you'd like to throw at James.
What got you into journalism?
What got me into journalism? Well, I suppose being a frustrated novelist did. I always wanted to write. When I was 7, maybe 8 years old, my father, who's a school teacher, got an old Imperial typewriter from his school, and I gave up toys on that day and devoted my days to, it was a great big cast iron thing, weighed a ton, hammering into these keys, all sorts of stories. Then when I was a teenager, I ran a football fanzine. Went to
That's roughly when I met you, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's right. Went to university, was an editor on the student paper, and then got my first journalism gig 19 years ago, and I've written for various publications. I've done some broadcast work for the BBC, and now my day job is as a sports news journalist.
And if we just move along to David.
How much of your journalistic work influenced the actual novel itself?
Look, there's little bits that I draw upon. And like I've reported from Palestine, for instance, and there's an interlude that's features there. I've reported from Jordan. You know, I've always written about sport and politics and the sort of intersection. So it's quite prosaic compared to Paul, who's a war correspondent and has hung around with them all his career. But in that course of work, I do know several war correspondents. James Dorsey, who was a Wall Street Journal reporter in the Balkans, for instance, is a friend of mine, and I've met people while on assignment out there who've told me plenty of stories and plenty of hair-raising stories. So I suppose there's an authenticity that comes from that. I wouldn't say that the character Paul, because he's a journalist, is drawn on any of them, but certainly being lucky enough to know those people and how the jobs that they've done has helped me build up that character. And actually one of the things I did shortly after finishing it was I listened to the audio book of the Sunday Times correspondent Marie Colvin's life. Lindsay Hilsum, the Channel 4 journalist, wrote it, and it's absolutely brilliant. I'd recommend it. But having listened to that and then read the book, I was quite happy that the life I'd invented for him was actually fairly authentic.
I think that is the thing that shines through in your storytelling in this book is authenticity. Even though we know that chunks of this are just totally made up, from yourself, it does read as though it could be happening to ordinary people that we could all know. I mean, the characters are all as real as we are, and what happens, despite some of it seems quite extreme, these things happen in real life. The authenticity, I think, is one of the key ingredients of the book. Alban, as a next to ask.
Yeah, there's a lot in that book which I think sounds really interesting. I mean, to me personally, I'm not an honorary, I'm not a Scouser by birth, but I like to think there's a bit of Liverpool with me. In 1981, I was working in Liverpool, and I spent my first 16 years of my teaching career in Bootle. So I feel it and know it. I remember the Toxteth riots and what it was like, and then the Garden Festival was the Tories' answer to it. I suppose my question though is about The Outsiders as a title, and I'm interested in your living in Ireland. Do you look back and see with some objectification because you live outside the country now, or?
Yeah, I mean, I left Liverpool in 1998, but I say it's never left for me. And certainly before lockdown, I was here very, very often. I owned a business which I moved to the city, which I now describe as an act of insanity because it affected my health and my finances, and it just about worked okay for a time, but it was very, very hard living in another country and trying to manage a team. I've retained my Everton season ticket. There's been season tickets in my family since the
I can understand that.
So pretty much all my family live here or plan to live here.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of good reasons to come back. I would say that I probably do have an objective view of it, but I'm also very, very protective of the city, and I don't take kindly to any criticism or scouse bashing.
Yeah.
And I have a very sentimental attachment to it in some ways and a very realistic attachment in others. I suppose what I get when I come back for these very intense periods of time, it might be a long weekend, or I'm here for slightly longer now from here, and I'm here until next weekend. I get a highlights package, and some of the less appealing facets about the city I'm not really exposed to, I suppose.
Yeah. So,
go on, Alban, what are you going to say?
I was going to say, who are the outsiders in your story? I mean, Nadja, obviously, because she's...
Everyone's an outsider. That's the whole point. So Paul's an outsider because he sort of comes from the suburban outlands. Nadja's an outsider because she's been thrust from war-torn Europe into Britain in the 1950s and has built a life for her. Sarah, his girlfriend, is an outsider because she's from the city's, you know.
Is it some sort of existential statement then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look, it's this idea that, you know, I touched upon it when I was reading the thing from chapter 1, that you could, you know, you can be from part of the city but not, you know, be completely oblivious to other parts.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, George.
I'll read it.
Oh, hold on, George. I can't hear you yet. Just start again. Still no sound.
How's that?
Yes, we
Any
can
sound
hear you
now. Yeah. Sorry, I'll move the microphone a little closer. How about that? Normally, I'm being told I shout, so well, hopefully we'll be okay. So yeah, James, you were saying about you were studying history. So as a historian or with that background, what would be the period of history other than the 80s that would most interest you for maybe writing another novel?
Oh, good heavens!
That's a good question. That.
Yeah, that is a good question. Look, I've got a couple of ideas for follow-up novels, which I'm not going to talk about now because they're not really developed. And they draw, one of them in particular draws upon a different part of the city's history in the 1960s. But yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I have a friend from Birmingham who is wanting to write a memoir of his life, and you know, you think Birmingham, but actually that's got a massively interesting history as well. Birmingham in the 60s and 70s, this great multicultural melting pot with all sorts of racial tensions and stuff that, you know, amazing music, and you know, you've got Birmingham pub bombings. You know, I suppose I was going to write another similar novel. I think that would be a great backdrop to a modern urban novel.
Cool. So more of the location rather than the era.
Yeah, I think geography is as important as the era. And look, my professional background, my academic background is really Middle Eastern history. So, you know,
well, there's a lot you could touch on in that with what's going on in the modern day, let alone, you know, from the 70s and the Palestine-Israeli conflict, you know, which you touch on, you know, in this.
Yeah. Look, you know, my late grandfather was served in Palestine, and I did a lot of academic research around Palestine in the 1940s, and it's absolutely amazing and incredible. And I know people in I suppose what you call elite families in that region, and you know, their family stories are just totally incredible. But whether it would translate into a good novel, I'm not quite sure.
Andy?
Right. What it is, can I put in context for myself? At the time of the Toxteth riots, I was on holiday in Scotland in July 1981. I was staying outside of Edinburgh, Moulton Hall, and we were getting the local papers, and because we spoke with a Liverpool accent, it was a case of they thought we'd gone up there to cause trouble. however naive that might seem, that, you know, people do have that opinion. And you'd have got the impression from what I was reading in some of the Scottish newspapers that it was hand-to-hand combat like the Gorbals or Rotten Row. And yet when we got back to Liverpool, my school friend, was actually a policeman, and he was in his first year being a probationer, you know, when they have to get so many arrests in a time period or whatever. And he went down there because he basically cancelled all leave for probationers to provide manpower. And he went down there, and I phoned him to find out how things were. And the newspapers had kind of exaggerated it because he didn't have stringers. They didn't have local reporters. You just basically got phoned down the wire from the Daily Mirror in Manchester or something. And I told her, you know, Liverpool, this is going on. I wonder how much of that perspective, you know, or rather what your point of view is about how the press can sometimes exaggerate these things, because with the benefit of hindsight, there was a lot of trouble, but it was, to some extent, the reasons are kind of understood, but they were never really completely dealt with. But the context was kind of exaggerated out of all proportion.
Yeah, well, look, context is everything. I think from a journalist perspective, I would answer that, you know, it's easy to shoot the messenger, and if people don't like the way a story's been spun, the journalists are the first people who were attacked. You know, they were serious. You know, it was a serious uprising, and you know, two serious periods of violence. What I touch upon in the book, though, is how, for instance, the TV cameras are positioned behind the police lines, so you see the rioters coming at them rather than what went on the other way. And if you look at archive footage, that's generally what you see. You know, you just see angry black men instead of policemen going around beating people up, which is essentially how it started. And you know, for sure there was violence was tolerated, there was corruption, and there was racism within all police forces, not just Merseyside. You know,
well, Bristol had riots about the same time, didn't it?
Bristol had them, and Brixton had them, and it happens. And I saw it again when I lived in London 10 years ago. There were massive riots in South London where I lived. I live not far from Woolwich, which, you know, the town centre was burned down. The big department store in Croydon was burnt down. You know, it does happen, and people in different parts of the country can be inspired or motivated by what they see on TV or read in the newspapers.
Well, history repeated itself, didn't it, in 2011 with the death of Mark Duggan, and there was riots all over back then. I remember being on holiday in Canada, hearing about it on the TV screens, London, even in Liverpool too.
Yeah.
Just riots everywhere.
Yeah, look, I always remember getting the phone call from my kids' nursery at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Could you come and pick them up, please? We're closing early. And, you know, the staff were literally barricading it in case something happened. And I remember driving down. We sort of lived on the edge of Blackheath at a crossroads, and driving down the South Circular past where Stephen Lawrence was murdered, and there were gangs of people tooled up with weapons who were sort of marching down towards Woolwich, where there was a big scene of violence. You know, there were certainly mobs around. Whether that was, you know, a direct parallel to Toxteth or Bristol or Brixton in 1981, I don't know, but it was certainly quite frightening at the time.
I think anything like that is, isn't it? Julie, have you got a question?
I have. From what you've said, the book's very obviously cited in Liverpool. Do you have a picture in your head of the sorts of actors you would like to play the lead parts? And have you got people in mind that you would pick if you were given the Hollywood dollar to spend on them?
Was given the Hollywood dollar, gosh, well, you know, you'd obviously want to have Jimmy McGovern or Frank Cottrell Boyce writing the screenplay for it.
You could ask Frank. He only lives down the road.
Yeah. I don't know really. I'll 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 ask my son, who's a film buff, and ask him when he's got round to reading.
You'll have to do a blog, James, of some of the music that influenced you that gets direct name checks. But for every song that you can mention in anecdotes, there must be 5 or 6 others that were bouncing around in your head when you were writing the book. You should do your Spotify playlist for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't actually say the music itself inspired me, but certainly the gig going experience in Liverpool and was very much in my mind. And it's such a vibrant city, and I had so many amazing experiences in my teens when I was going to see up and coming bands.
Yeah, hanging outside the back of the Royal Court trying to get autographs.
Yeah, and the Lomax Club, it was really incredible. You could go to a gig. I mean, I remember going to see a Manchester band called Marion at the Lomax, and about probably early 1995, and I was only 16 at the time, and going to the bar afterwards, and Noel Gallagher and Paul Weller were in there.
Wow.
you I don't think you get that today, but you would have got it if you got it in the 90s, you'd have certainly got it in the early 80s.
Yeah. Anyway, we're about done, but obviously your mum and dad have patiently sat through watching all this. So I don't know if they've got anything they'd like pretty much to be the last to say anything really before we say thank you and goodbye and everything. Mr. and Mrs. C, anything you'd like to ask him or say?
Is my dad logging off?
Well, we can only say perhaps that we've got a low battery here for a start. We can only say that hopefully your upbringing, James, in the Crosby area in the 80s possibly rubbed off on you to a certain extent, because you do describe, for example, the class differences of some of your characters in that novel. The sort of educational background you had, perhaps. You went to a school which was probably veering on middle class, but on the other hand, you did get the sort of rough diamond element. So did any of that sort of help you in your development of characters?
Well, I've purposely made the suburb where some of it's based anonymous so that people don't draw obvious comparisons. And look, I can say it's an amalgam between Crosby and Hightown and Formby, and I lived in Crosby, but I had friends in the other 2 places. I think certain things from class and education are in there, but also other people's perception. So when you left the city, how other people viewed you, and it still makes me angry now that when I went on school trips to France and Italy, we weren't allowed to say we were from Liverpool.
Really?
St. Helens, yeah, because they'd had incidents, I suppose, after the Heysel Stadium disaster, where people had been attacked or threatened, and that sort of thing made me maybe quite belligerent, really. Very, really.
When you were talking before, one of the things that kept coming back to me was talking about people from Liverpool taking you, and you had the 2 younger brothers. You were about 5, to Oxford, and you were paddling in a little paddling pool, and got talking to a lady, and she eventually asked me where I was from, and I said, "Oh, we're from Liverpool," and she said, "Really?" She said, "You don't look as if you come from Liverpool."
Oh no.
Yes, and that has stuck with me all this time, and it makes me so angry when you see Liverpudlians typecast in as they are so often in dramas and police dramas and things. They're always the bad characters.
There is an element of that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
I think it's improving a little bit now, but for a long time that was the way it was.
Yeah.
Well, they said in 1989, Ricky Tomlinson is quoted as saying that Brookside, which he had a very prominent part in, sold the city of Liverpool short. Now, at the time, he reckoned Phil Redmond's template was okay, but there were a lot of people who criticised that very early on not long after Channel 4 started. And although the writers rotated a bit, it was still basically according to the script editor. And these were based either on things that had happened, on people he'd met. So I never quite understood why Ricky Tomlinson said that they had sold the people of Liverpool short. Did he say it was making us into a group of stereotypes or character types? You know, that there was always going to be the cheeky one, or the one who tried to cheat you or something.
Because Harry Enfield satirised Brookside.
Oh yeah, yeah.
With his Scousers. I mean, look, a soap opera is only going to show, and a soap opera like Brookside showed an extreme version of the city, didn't it? It was always quite edgy, but I don't think it sold Liverpool any shorter than EastEnders did the East End of London, you know.
But there is one thing I will say, and that is that generally the one character trait that everyone associates with Liverpool is being friendly and tolerant and quite warm. And you reckon it's the Irish influence, quite warm to Liverpool. And in that respect, the positive things are what we should be associated with. But unfortunately, you'll always get people who make very lazy choices as regards what they consider typical. Like all people in London are meant to carry a rolled up umbrella and have a bowler hat on. You know, I mean, if we're led to believe that,
We all read Mr. Ben when we were little, didn't we?
And then the shopkeeper appeared. Yeah.
Anyway, guys, listen. James very kindly has given us an hour, and he is mad with things to do to PR the book while he's back in Liverpool. Anyone who wants the book, just send me a DM or let me know. I'll be seeing James on Friday morning or thereabouts, James, to get any dedications and some signed copies from you. And do spread the word. You know, even if this book's not for you personally. I'm reading it. I'm well over halfway through it. I cannot wait to finish it. It's brilliant. So you can.
I wanted to read your copy when we met last week, Tony, and I didn't get to it.
No,
but I want one, James. I expect one wittily autographed.
Oh, he's working on that. Well, you've got a nice little touch early on when they're drinking homemade schnapps, and you know you've got like Yiddish toast and then an Irish toast.
Yes. So maybe I'll
Masseltoff.
Yeah, I'll inscribe it with Yiddish and a bit of Gaelic.
Yeah, well, maybe that's what you should do. Yeah, but no, the book, honestly, whether you get it off me or you pick it up anywhere around the area or online, hand on heart, you will not be disappointed. It flows rapidly. The characters are brilliant and believable. The powerful stuff will hit you between the eyes and. You know, the worst thing about trying to talk about a book before people have read it is there's bits that you would love to talk about, but they'll spoil what happens, you know. But when they get to the Middle East, the first thing that Paul has to deal with is it's quite brutal, and that's all I can say, James. You know, but you know that's how he starts off is journalistic day, isn't it? With one of the most horrific things that anyone could see, and he's got a report on it.
Yeah.
So we can't say any more than that. But listen, we're going to let James and his mum and dad dip out just as they go. I think we'll just have a little bit. Listen.
I left a note on his dresser and my old wedding ring with these few goodbye words. How can I sing goodbye, oh sleepy head?
So there we have it, James. You can't
Thank
be
you.
can you? But we will say thank you kindly, and especially to your sister and your mum and dad for joining us, and the other people who popped in earlier. I will see you before Friday because we might have other things to arrange. So let me know, and we'll hook up and sort that out. The book needs everybody to recommend it. In fact, it really needs everybody to read it. George and Julie can share a copy. That will cost you half price each, you see. Bargain. Buy one, get one free. Julie can read page 1, George can read page 2, and you can talk about it.
Make sure the last page isn't missing.
Oh, I know. That's another story, isn't it? That can
It's
happen.
a little bit of an in-joke. We'll have to explain.
Yeah, that can happen. I don't know if, James, you ever heard the story. You know, they print books that go to the airports, you know, when you go abroad on holiday. And it was someone really famous, like Gerald Seymour, I think. And the whole of the last chapter was missing from like 10,000 copies of this book. And it had the last chapter of a totally different book in it. And they only had 7 people write to the publishers to say, we don't understand what happened at the end. And that is allegedly a genuine, true story. I mean, you've been a publisher. Imagine that when you're printing someone's autobiography and you slide in someone else's last chapter.
Yeah.
Hey, we noticed Neville Southall gets into the book.
Yes, Neville gets a mention. Howard Kendall gets a little mention as well, who are both people that I've worked with in the past.
Yeah, both truly lovely people.
Only very obliquely.
Yeah, but it's nice to be able to just do a little nod like that, isn't it? You know, the comment, we've signed a bin man. Yeah, but he's the best bin man that's ever played football, basically. Oh, brilliant. James, listen, you and your mum and dad slope off, and thank you ever so much for finding time to have a chat with us tonight. And I'll speak to you tomorrow evening onwards, and we'll catch up and carry on from there. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
very much.
Really great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. and Mrs. C, for popping in too.
Take care of yourselves.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
There we are, folks. Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Oh, Julie's disappeared. George is still there. And thank you all very much. It's nice to have a few people, you know, propping up something like that. Because we're having a slight problem with Facebook, which I'm going to have to look into. Even though we don't have to play music, sometimes it does feel like the music is part of what we're doing. And if certain songs are causing us to get instant bans by Warner Music or someone, but I've no way of knowing which record label, you know.
Because that's what we play. It's by Ols, isn't it?
I know.
Really?
It does push.
You know, that's relevant, like.
You know, we can all go on YouTube and listen to any song by anybody, which is free on the internet. The minute you or I decide to share a bit of Nina Simone or The Clash or something, you know, Universal Music or AMI suddenly say, you know, they take your Facebook page down.
You think it was the way to spread, though, really?
It's just mad, really is. You know,
They have you down for Donald Trump.
Do you reckon? And get me banned for 2 years. Could you cope without me for 2 years? Surely you couldn't.
No, not at all.
Anyway, George, we will let you, unless you want to stay for a bit, in which case you're more than welcome, but you've probably got work and family and things to attend to.
I have, I'm afraid, yeah.
So next Monday, we've got Ian D. Hall launching his new poetry collection. And then the week after, or the one or other of the two after is going to be Frank Cottrell Boyce. I just need to pin him to which of the two he can do, and then we'll get that publicized. And, you know, also, if you need a book for a 9, 10, 11-year-old, Noah's Gold, the new Frank Cottrell Boyce, well, George lives next door to him, so he already knows these things. But if you're bumping into anyone who's got kids that, you know, ironically maybe don't like reading a lot, just recommend that they read Frank Cottrell Boyce. He's hilarious. He's lovely. He always has plenty of wonderful things go on in his books. And
One of my favourite people.
He is. He's just genuinely. He's the best uncle that anyone could ever have, really. You know, he should be called Uncle Frank by us all. George, we will pop by and see you. Won't be tomorrow. I'll pop by Wednesday because I've got to slip you 30 quid for my concert tickets.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
I'll pop by on Wednesday. I haven't forgotten. Honest to
No
promise.
worries, mate.
You'll be in on Wednesday sometime during the day, yeah?
We will, yeah.
I'll drop you a message, check if you're not in one of your, you know, your counsellor meeting things. But no, I'll whiz by Wednesday morning or lunchtime, yeah?
Cool. Just one little thing, actually, before you go, you were saying about putting the wrong chapter at the end of a book.
Oh yeah.
Richard Bandler, who's one of the co-creators of NLP, in this book here, Teaching Excellence, they were selling this book on the stand at one of the big seminars he was doing in London, and there was something like from about, I don't know, halfway through to the end was blank.
Oh dear.
They'd sold this batch of books for, I think it was 4 seminars, and they'd sold quite a lot of them during the seminars, and nobody had spotted it.
It's mad, isn't it?
Absolutely nobody.
Yeah.
Really
It's
is.
only when we were having a flick through, we went, oh shit, it's blank. Oh my god.
Well, maybe you meant to write part
but
2 of
there
the
you
book
go.
yourself, having read part 1, because you've
Yeah, Tristram Shandy, isn't it?
Because it's all about building up how you think and build a stronger mindset, isn't it, George? You know,
Well, it should be,
brain,
and
isn't it?
that particular book, yes.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I've never seen anybody look quite so furious in their
Oh
life.
no!
But there we go.
It's done by
It was all
automation,
sorted.
isn't it? You know, I mean, they just set it
Yeah.
off to print 1,000 copies. If someone hasn't lined up enough chapter 1, chapter 2, you don't get chapter 2. It just gets whoosh, goes down a big
Yeah.
you know, a chain, doesn't it? George,
the
dip off
wormhole.
and get your tea, young man. I'll see you Wednesday.
Better go.
As ever.
See you Wednesday. Take care.
You are looking
Cheers,
good,
guys.
mate. This new regime, you're keeping it. You're trimming down nicely.
Yeah, keeping it trim, keeping it
Yeah,
trim.
I'm slowly
We'll see
starting.
you
I'll have to
soon.
catch you up. I'll see you Wednesday, mate. Take care for now. Bye now.
See you Wednesday. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye, George.
So
Can I give you an anecdote, Tony?
Of course you can.
In 1969, John Lennon and Yoko Ono had done a concept album called the Wedding Album. One side was them just saying, John, Yoko, John, Yoko. You can imagine pretty much the development of that side. The other side was a collection called Amsterdam of pieces they recorded when you were doing the wedding. That was the basic LP. One side, John and Yoko, the other side, Amsterdam. However, there was a guy called Richard Williams who was a reviewer for a newspaper. And Apple Records sent him 2 one-sided acetates. And the other side of the acetate was a tone, you know, where you normally put like a tone on as they're cutting the groove. And it was blank, effectively, except for this tone. So Richard Williams reviewed the first side and said, oh, John and Yoko are saying each other's names with ferocity, indicating the passion of their love affair. And the other side of this is a tone that varies somewhat from certain degrees, from 440 to 430, and then from 440 to 450 hertz, adding maintaining interest. And he reviewed side 4, which was the other blank groove, in the same way. John and Yoko luckily saw the funny side, and he sent him a thank you to Melody Maker's office saying, to Richard Williams, we have to congratulate you. This must be the first time the reviewer has topped the artist. We are not kidding. Love, John
Amazing.
and Yoko. So he hadn't realised it wasn't part of the album. It was just the way the acetates were pressed, and he had to get it in time to review it before the Christmas issue.
Oh.
So, you know, there you are.
Small
Something
anecdote.
always to be learned from these things.
There's a friend of mine who's I'm friends with on Facebook, and I've met her a few times. And she's the lady that when she was about 15, went to the Bed-In Montreal. And she's got the handwritten lyrics to Give Peace a Chance. And she spent most of her days, it's pictured that she spent all of her time at the Bed-In, but she didn't. She was only there. John was lovely to her, apparently. He said, look, you can come here as though you're coming to school. You can come here at 9 o'clock in the morning, 3:30, when you're meant to be home after school. You've got to go, but you can come back each day at 9 o'clock and be part of the protest. And he gave her the handwritten signed lyrics to Give Peace a Chance. How cool is that?
Very cool.
Gail Renard,
very
she's called. And, you know, she wrote a brilliant
must be worth a
children's
fortune.
account of how she met John Lennon and how important what they were doing was, and all the people she met at the hotel. But it's just small things are there, isn't it? Anyway, let's Alban up at the top there.
Hello.
So Blackpool, let's regale the world. Blackpool, he went to Wembley,
I went to Wembley and I had a wonderful day out. Apart from the first 5 minutes, they scored an own goal in the first 5 minutes. In fact, the first minute they scored an own goal, but then Kenny Dougal came back and he got a brace, and we were on cloud nine. So
have you got enough players to do well next year? Dare we ask?
Yeah, some of them are loans who've gone back. But he's such a good coach. Liverpool people will know him because he ran the youth team or the under-23s at Liverpool. Neil Critchley, wonderful coach. So we're hoping all these Premier League sides will be falling over themselves to lend us their best players.
Well, it does happen. I mean, Swansea got a couple of decent players off Liverpool and someone
else. Yeah. No. The future's bright. The future's tangerine.
And how did I haven't watched it yet. How did your Sassoon thing go?
Yeah, that went fine. We had some people there, and we gave the talk on that. So I must talk about Sassoon on here sometime.
Yeah, no, well, we definitely will. I mean, like I say, we've got Ian next week, which is quite important. Certainly, Andy and I are very keen to make sure people try and spread the word, and come and support a lovely guy who's written some stunning poetry.
Yeah.
He deserves people to hear him read a few of the poems out, doesn't he, Andy?
He certainly does. And I mean, there's one that's it's almost like a masterwork. Imagine something like Paradise Lost or The Ram and the Ancient Mariner. But it's actually a series of images and litany, which you've got to hear. It's called Salmanaf's Extra Day.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
And there's a couple of other things which are almost like haiku. There's one about Darcy Sato, the writer of a book called Lady Don't Fall Over Backwards. I, for my part, have done a couple of varied pieces of work, which in fact Mr. Holden there has actually contributed to. And what it is with Ian is the times when the need to create something takes over strongly, and you can tell that his use of words and his way of phrasing things. Even when we asked him to write sleeve notes, what we did, he wrote the most amazing sleeve notes, and it was written with feeling and passion. It was really a work of art, lovely.
Just Andy, just while you're talking away there,
yes.
Let me hopefully see if I can get this to work. Do you want us to play the blues version or the film noir version?
I think I've heard the film noir version, but I'd like the blues version. The only problem is it's quite long. It's about 5 minutes 50.
Yeah, well, so I think we can, we
2 minutes or something.
Let's give this a blast.
My blues songs are long.
Blues songs are long, aren't they? This is the missing page, recorded only 2 weeks ago by Andrew Hesford, songwriter, assisted by young Dave Holden. Who is the guy playing the blues guitar licks on this album?
No, I'm playing the keyboard.
You'll play the keyboard,
and he's playing the acoustic 12-string.
Yeah,
but you've got a guy playing like the lead, the lead guitar blues halfway through, haven't you?
He's brilliant.
Who
absolutely brilliant guy.
What was his name again? Sorry.
Okay.
Oh my God, what a mess.
who killed you. Well, we can only guess. The shadows hide the killer. Could be anyone, I suppose. The missing page holds the answer, but Johnny Oxford knows. Since I picked up that book, my mind has been fried. Every combination of weapon and suspects have been tried. Kept me awake at night, around the room I paced. What hit was in that ad? Do you get sand kicked in your face?
Superb. We love it.
5.
We really. I mean, you've got to sing a certain way to sing the blues, haven't you?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I had originally tried it in one version. I was never happy with what they call the demonstration recording. And I sent one version. I felt this is no good. And what happens is when you bring something in and other people can see what it is. And I had a lot of help from the likes of Dave and from Brendan, our violin player, Brendan Marsh, because I thought having some violin on it gives it something different. All blues songs are nearly always the same thing, you know. But also with Dave's keyboard part, Gavin's playing, and Derek's drumming. So Derek was absolutely pin sharp and on the money. And the production by Gary Thomas, you know, it came together. It was just that I wasn't happy. I had the words, and the words I was happy with. I wasn't quite happy with the tune of it. And I'm pleased with it now. Now that I've had a few days of not hearing it, and listening to it, I think that's really good.
It is.
I don't remember an awful lot about it.
And it's from a forthcoming album in progress.
Yeah. The album is called Unmasked at Last.
Unmasked at Last. You're not tapping into this masked singer, masked dancer, masked Liverpudlian thing, are you?
No. The whole thing is it's like release, like freedom, you know.
Okay.
It's not an anti-vax or anti-mask protest. It's just merely saying, you know, lockdown's over, you know, time to break out, you know.
Yeah, well, talking of lockdown's over, I mean, we will see you before Saturday, but I think we should all join together and wish young Andrew happy birthday, because is it not your birthday at the weekend?
Yeah, it's on Friday, but you forgive
Friday. Are we having a party? Have we been invited yet?
I couldn't plan anything.
No?
Well, every time I try to book anyway, we don't know what's happening.
Can you not just have a garden party? Like you know...
Actually, that's going to happen.
You're going to have a garden party?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
Well, yes, and to answer Alban's question and Zoe's, and Dave already knows, I will be 60.
Ah, youngster.
He retired early, Alban. He retired early.
He did.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I saw someone from where I used to work. He saw me today and he went, God, you look years younger. He said, what's your secret? And I got on the bus as he got off and I said, suntan lotion, but never sitting in the sun.
That's a good answer, isn't it? Yeah. Zoe, are you back with us at the minute?
Zoe, you're on mute, love.
You're on mute again, Zoe.
Yeah, I'm back with you.
Okay.
My phone might go.
Okay.
If I'm going on, but at the moment I'm with you.
Okay.
So sorry about the whole.
Yeah. I was just going to say, while we've got you, were you going to read us a new poem or?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It's not got a title, but if you can think of one, do let me know.
That's hard sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. Slash the hate, slash the pain, sticky plaster. It's just that, it'll peel back, air the open wound. Slash label, slash prejudice. Instead, open your heart, your mind. Walk in their shoes and then judge. Slash the words rolled and see if you look to the future. It's yesterday is gone. Today is a gift. Use it well.
Oh.
Healing is a good word.
What say, Andy?
Call it healing.
Healing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely.
What do you expect? I used to be a nurse.
Well, you
Healing.
used to be, but you know you should
Come out of retirement.
Yeah, he shuns it all now.
Oh no, I've not shunned it. I mean, I spent yesterday. What was it? Last Wednesday, helping someone to recover. I don't find it remarkable. You know, where people say, "Oh, isn't it great that you're a nurse and you do this?" And yeah, if someone's a postman and delivers a baby, or someone's your local milkman and saves your life, that's more remarkable. They're not trained to do it.
Yeah, that's
Whereas
very
I am,
true.
so
That's very true.
You
Zoe, you finding writing's coming back to you now? Then have you woken up to writing again?
To be honest with you, it's a really difficult one. And so it seems like a moaning, but sometimes I can write fine. However, due to having arthritis, it then can sometimes make it so I physically I can't write.
Right. Yeah. Got you. Yeah.
Sometimes the words won't always stay still on the page.
Oh God.
So it's one of those things where I'm trying really hard to do it, but then there's times when it just becomes a physical impossibility, really.
Have you ever tried I've never used it, but in Word, I think you can enable like a dictation tool, so you can talk directly into Word. Have you ever tried it?
I've not.
Up at the top, in the thing at the top with file, edit, and whatever. Go through. I can't remember which one it's in now, but it is there in one of them. And I don't know, if it's, you need to buy a microphone or the one on your laptop itself does it. But I do know other people who have been using it.
Absolutely, because it's so frustrating, sort of not being able to write, particularly find it's weird. Sometimes I can reduce the pain depending on which particular joints are playing up at any one time.
That's not fun. Not fun. Dave, well, Alban's going to read a poem now, but have you got your guitar to hand?
Not in the room with me, no.
Well, while Alban's digging a poem out, go and get your guitar, because we need some live music.
But we need Andrew to sing "Happy Birthday" to himself.
Oh yeah, well maybe Dave can play the chords and we can all hum. Who are you going to read for us, Alban?
You've got a choice of two. I was trying to find something contemporary. Down here in Dorset, we're celebrating Thomas Hardy's birthday.
We'll do some Hardy then
on June the 2nd, so I can give you a bit of Hardy.
That would be nice.
The other contemporary thing is it's D-Day, and there's one of my favourite poems by Keith Douglas, who was killed on Wednesday.
Let us put you as speaker view and do the D-Day poem first.
Okay.
And then you can do after Andy's done a thingy. What's the word? We can sing Happy Birthday to Andy, and Dave can sing a song. Andy can do a song of his own, or if he wants as well. And then you can do the other poem, can't you? So Dave's back.
Okay.
So this is who's this one? Off you go, Alban. You do the intro.
Oh, okay. Keith Douglas was actually killed on the Wednesday the 9th, which was after D-Days, but it was about that time he died. He was in the army, fought at El Alamein, and he came over and was killed on the beaches, or at least in the Bocage area anyway, killed by a German mortar. And he wrote one of my favorite poems called Vergiss-mich-nicht. If there's any real German speakers out there, I apologize for my German. I don't speak German, but it's Vergiss-mich-nicht, which is German for forget me not. And it's his poem about a tank driver in the desert in El Alamein, discovering this body of a German soldier. So if I can read that to you, it's called Vergiss-mich-nicht. 3 weeks gone and the combatants gone, returning over the nightmare ground, we found the place again and found the soldier sprawling in the sun, the frowning barrel of his gun overshadowing. As we came on that day, he hit my tank with one like the entry of a demon. Look, here in the gun pit spoil, the dishonored picture of his girl who has put Steffi vergiss mich nicht in a copybook Gothic script. We see him almost with content, abased, and seeming to have paid and mocked at by his own equipment that's hard and good when he's decayed. But she would weep to see today how on his skin the swart flies move, the dust upon the paper eye, and the burst stomach like a cave. For here the lover and killer are mingled, who had one body and one heart, and death, who had the soldier singled, has done the lover mortal hurt.
Wow.
Wow.
That is a good poem. I've not heard that poem before.
I know.
That is
Really,
seriously.
really, really powerful.
So who was
Lovely
it by?
poem, isn't
Just so anyone watching or catching up later.
Keith Douglas.
Keith Douglas.
He made a name for himself in the 1930s. So T.S. Eliot backed him, and he was a bit of a rebel as well.
Now we're gonna spotlight Dave, because Dave's got two jobs to do. Dave's got two jobs to do. He's got to strum "Happy Birthday," and we're all gonna sing to Andy. Andy, mute yourself quick. You can't sing to yourself, can you? Alban, you're muted. You have to unmute. Yeah. You know how? Can you play that?
Right, what am I doing? I'm losing track.
Oh, we're going to play Happy Birthday, and we're all going to sing to Andy. First verse, a happy birthday to you.
All right, okay.
Does this work?
It's one of those songs we all know. And we should all know the words. And we should
know the words, yes, the chords.
It's just picking the key, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just it.
We do it in the key of flat.
Oh. Which flat do you want to do?
B flat.
B flat. Oh, blimey.
No, whatever. We're joking.
Oh, right,
when you hear me sing, you'll soon suss out I can sing any flat that you want.
All right. Well, we'll do it in C then, because 1, 2, 3. Happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Andrew.
Happy birthday to you.
He's a jolly good fellow. He's a jolly good fellow. He's a jolly good fellow. And it is round when we go to
all of us.
So there we are, Andy. Live on British radio and the internet. Your first communal birthday of the year. You can have two birthdays like the Queen this year.
Nah.
Absolutely.
She's
well,
already
enough though, because you don't want to live your life away too quick.
Indeed, yes. Aye. But Dave, have you got a song of yours you could give us?
I'm trying to remember the ones that I did last time.
Oh, don't worry unduly. I mean, not everybody who watches it will be the same people who watch each week. So,
meeny, miny, mo. 1, 2. This one's a little bit of a controversial one, so you know what we're doing. And I'll try and best remember the word. It's kind of like taking the mickey of, a dependency on like digital devices, social media, that sort of thing.
We immediately like the sound of this, and you haven't sung it yet.
1, 2, 3, 4. Spending all day with screen to eye. Never look away nor even try. Ignore everything, just let it all pass by. No time at all for reality. Forget about books or the TV. Stay on Facebook, make your life story. Can you see what I mean? It's a life support machine. main event may come your way. The weather turns great on that day. You had no clue, you're miles away. Focusing on your next selfie. Not a lot, just 33. Share it online, let some strangers see. Can you see what I mean? It's a life support machine. Wake up, put that phone away. Tell me, how will you live today? One sunny day and you decide, don't stay at home, let's take a ride. Gone all day, left the charger behind. You can get home and wonder why. Maybe break down and even cry. Can't carry on, the mobile battery died. Can you see what I mean? It's a life support machine.
Love it. It's great. Really,
Love
really
it.
great.
Long about the original, but
Oh, no, that's great. I mean,
There's so much truth in that. It really is. It really sums it today up, doesn't it?
yeah, that's spot on. That I mean, that really should be played in every school, you know, in assembly. To be perfectly honest,
It's a work in
teaching up
progress.
there,
I mean,
Olben. Would you have liked Andy?
I thought
Dave
that was
coming in,
great. Yeah,
singing that.
Except I'm probably more the guilty one because I use Facebook and Twitter too much these days. My old age.
Well, I
well,
think
we are all guilty of it, but
Yeah.
instead of being preachy, I thought just take the Mickey out of it.
Yeah,
instead
yeah.
of
True.
Well, I don't know if any of you are on Twitter, but if you are, is it terminally tangerine or?
I always keep that secret because that's my id.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't told anybody. No
No,
one.
no,
knows.
just as well.
Yeah.
That's my chance to rant and you know, it's
the great
fill my
thing about
spleen a bit.
Twitter is sometimes someone will post something that they want people to see, and then you get
Yeah.
people like Olben and other people that I know who manage to come up with something really witty and cutting and insert it immediately below this polemic about, you know, isn't Boris great? And Olben will go, well, actually, no, he's not really, because you know he did the following the other day. Did you not know? It's brilliant. It doesn't
compared to his
happen on
hairstylist,
Facebook.
he probably is.
It doesn't happen on Facebook as much. It definitely seems to be a Twitter thing that people can be really on the money very quickly and invade someone else's, you know, statements. It's brilliant, really.
Yeah.
Andy, and now that you've stopped feeling old, because you're back to being 59 again now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you got
Go on.
have you got something you can with us? Give us. Do I
Yeah,
note a guitar around your neck?
Well, let's see if we can remember this.
That's the hard bit live, isn't it?
This is the one. When Dave and I were discussing recordings we were going to make, I sent him a list of some titles, and there were two, and they were called Could Have Talked and In Between Pauses. And remember your comment, Dave, I loving the titles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened was I looked at both songs and I thought, there's elements of this that fit in with that, so I just combined them, right? Trying to think of the first. Half his words were spoken, the world turned dark as blue. Couldn't see how I'd find again a better part of you. Only a moment ago, seconds went by so fast. I lost the pain of what concerns to the past.
It stopped recording. So I tell you what, Andy, just to put you on the spot, start again. Sorry about that.
Okay. I've changed my mind over that one anyway.
Oh, I'd like that one.
Do another one if you want.
Yeah. This is the one that ended up being a production. To explain it briefly, we recorded this March the 2nd, 2019. I've even got the original because I keep all the bits.
Wow.
You know, when I'm working out the order of the words and stuff, can you see that? So I kept all the words and then I typed it out properly and took it to the session. So that's laminated, right? But what happened was, although it had violin on it, I didn't feel it was full. I wanted the cello on it. So put a call out on Facebook, album Facebook, put a call out and said, is there anyone there who plays cello? And Luke Moore said, why didn't you ask me? Now, Luke Moore's quite a renowned classical musician in Liverpool. So we had a chat at the end of February 2019 before I recorded this. And he said, yes, sure. And, you know, we had quite a good laugh. So I sent him the recording and he sent it back. But the problem was, well, technical reasons. I need someone to actually mix it. So I had a friend of mine, Philip Balmer, do that. And it was ready on Christmas Eve, 2019. So there you are. There's the story. Okay. I walk with you into a meadow. Sun was high in the sky. We were starry-eyed and laughing. Not a cloud went by. Then the rains came, washed the sun away. Didn't have a coat to wear. And we landed to a shelter. Roses fell blonde hair. Looked into your blue eyes. Saw the sun once again. The moment seemed to be ours alone, preserved within a frame. Then the evening came, the moment passed, the early top lingered in the air. While summer kind of mellow, recalling all those years, disappearing like a daydream, no image of you remains. The memory still lingers, like the sun and the rain. So beautiful, far away, close my eyes and wonder where you're gone. The love we made I still remember as the years go on.
It's a lovely, simple little song, Andy.
But most of the time it's like I'd written the song and it came to me quite easily. And I always suspect that, and I think I'm going to put that in the Google search and see if there's something like it. And I wasn't, but the original name of the track, it's called Watercolor. And the original name, it's on here, Watercolor Miniatures, on that piece of paper. You can't quite see it, but it's there. And I was looking out, because I remember seeing a painting, a print of a painting somewhere where I was working. And it was I think it was Cézanne. But it was the way in which if you look at it up close, it's just brush strokes. But when you pull out, you can see the composite making up an image. And I thought, I don't know why, watercolor miniatures, you know, in other words, I wanted to describe about a day when I was very young and the arc of a love affair. Yeah. So I diarise most of the things that have happened to me.
Well, isn't that what all singers, all poets, all writers do? Whether they name the parties or they don't name the parties, because it's like James's book. I mean, it's beautifully written. You know, he's a genuinely great writer, and you know, I just hope that people out there pick his book up and read it. Like with songs you write and poems Ian writes, and you know, Zoe and other people I know write poetry. You just hope that people find time to connect to the culture.
Who was it who wrote Only Connect? Was it, I can't remember, was it Alden or Yates or something like that?
It was Foster.
Thank you.
E.M.
Only
Foster.
Connect, Only
E.M.
E.M. Foster.
E.M. Foster. Yeah.
But I always thought that sometimes things happen, and yet it says something for the situation. Where when I put that on, I think SoundCloud, I had a lovely message. This person said, "This is lovely. It describes something so well." And I had to answer. Actually, it's about you.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Oh,
It was about her.
wow. Yeah.
And she goes, "I didn't think that made much of an impression on you. It's getting towards 30 years ago."
I mean, it's got a lovely sort of simple 60s sound to it, really. You know, it would suit just a voice, a guitar, and like you say, a cello, you know, just lifting a layer in the background. If anything, it could be slightly spoilt by having more instrumentation in it. Maybe a tiny bit of piano or keyboard might work, but
Well, you've been present at when I did a recording, and I wanted something to come over as simple as can be. I'm not into lo-fi recording, but I am into like stripping it back and letting the recording breathe a bit. It's funny, you know, I've worked with Dave a few times, and Dave comes up. Some of the things he comes up with, he's like me. He's probably. I don't know if you agree with this, Dave. We have technology and we have all the things we want, but somehow there's a longing for something more. You know, like connection with people rather than with things. And I get the impression, over to you, Dave. I get the impression that your concerns are not dissimilar to a lot of us.
But I think more really, it's more, as I think I mentioned this on the last session, I think more what inspires me to write is more what I say, is in the whole world that goes on. And some of it is more like with the song I just did, it's taking an issue which could be seen in quite a serious way, but then turning it so, as I say, it's not a doom and gloom sort of melancholic piece. It's just more of a spreading awareness, but it's a bit silly, isn't it? So it at least doesn't put people off when they hear it and think, oh yeah, I'm guilty of that too, aren't I?
Well, we all are, aren't we? We all are.
And I'm reminded of a 10cc track, I think it was on an album called 10 out of 10, called, Here's Tomorrow Today. And it was all about, technology and how these things sort of could enhance your life, but it gave a warning about how it probably couldn't.
Well, I mean, there's been so many writers who write about future technology, from sci-fi through to, pop songs. There's that in Zager and somebody in When I Wake Up in the Year 2035, or Zager and Evans, is it?
Oh, 2525.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
I mean, I always thought of it in terms of the future's coming, and yet maybe the future is tangerine. But the future's coming, but I somehow feel that there's things that we need to look at which are more moral issues or ethical issues. And there is a hair's breadth between the two. And I'd like to think that, some things enhance our lives. I actually think that lockdown, I mean, apart from the grip it had on all of us, and the feeling of captivity that some people had, it's actually left some people with a kind of form of PTSD.
Well, it reminds me of a song which I actually heard not too long ago, and was actually released, I think, about a couple of years ago. And again, it's taking more of a inspiration from modern day sort of thing, futuristic sort of thing. In fact, I think the emblem that it came from is called the Future Bites, in double-edged meaning there. But the bridge to this song went as follows: consumer of life, hold my hand, extend your rights. It's the power to purchase to excess that sets you apart and can give you the ultimate high. Abuser of time, if there's something that you want, you don't need it, but have to concede it's making you happy, and that's all that matters to you.
And who's that by, Dave?
I forget the artist's name. I just heard the bridge and just thought it's just so on. It's just like it's so relevant. That terminology.
What was that, Zoe?
Which sounds good, but it can take over.
Yeah, it's it. It's both paying tribute to it, but also condemning it at the same time. In the sense that it can go too far. You want to indulge yourself, but materialism can just take over your brain and just lead you down a very dark path.
Well, I think that's the worry in many ways through lockdown is that people have found it just a little too easy just to rely on consumerism at the click of a button. There's not enough reality, which is awkward because we haven't been allowed it. But there's so many people that all they seem to do now is just, oh, I've seen it on Amazon or somewhere like that. Click and it's mine. And they're not connecting to anything other than the process of seeing it online and buying it online. I find it worrying, really.
It's like, I mean, it's one thing that I've always felt up until recently anyway, because we kind of had no choice when like buying a musical instrument. You can just buy it from like Give Your Music or Tom or any site like Andrew.
Just don't buy a bass from an import at the moment, would Andy say.
No!
Have you heard this story, Alban? It's quite funny now. But it wasn't at the time. When did you start ordering your new bass guitar, Andy?
I'll tell you what, I'll tell him after. Dave, you were mentioning something there. Go on.
But just to wrap it up quickly, it denies you the chance to experience the actual item before knowing for certain if it's what you really want.
Yeah.
You're only going by what other people tell you rather than what the experience actually is.
No, I think that's very true. Very true.
I think it feels special when it's something that you're making a decision on. I mean, the original plan I had was to buy this bass. Myself and Dave would have gone to town on Saturday. Had the usual thing, a bit of a meal or whatever. Looked around music shops, tried some of the instruments if we could have done. And generally it would have ended up with me buying something. Dave having a go and going, that's all right. I'll have to see how much money you've got. Things like that. Or I wouldn't buy that because, that part's a bit dodgy. But I wanted that. I wanted that kind of thing to act as a governor against me just spending money blindly. And then lockdown comes, right? Right. And then my brother, who I don't go on with, gets on the internet and he says, I believe you're looking for a headless bass. I'd order it off Fomen DE, which of course is Deutsche Germany.
Did you mention war?
Well, I ordered it on January the 11th. They gave me a delivery date of the 1st of March. I rang up in the middle of March. They gave me a revised delivery date of April. Rang up third week of April, delivery date of the end of May. I rang up in the third week of May and they said, don't know how to tell you, but we're looking at October. Oh, please. I said, I want a refund. Oh, here's the thing now. We haven't actually put the sale through because we were waiting for the item to be delivered. And my brother had said it would cost 370 quid if I bought it in this country. But from Fomen DE, it will cost, what was it, £269. So you figure saving 100 quid, that's quite good. And then you realise with the custom fees and VAT, it would cost you £370 anyway. So I just thought, yeah, thank you, goodbye. Picked up the phone to Gear for Music and said, look, can you help me? I'm trying to buy a Steinberger, which is the headless bass I'm describing. He said, we've got a 5-string one. That's actually could be sent out to you. How much is it? And the price didn't displease me. I said, how much is the carriage? A £5. And I ordered it, and I had it in my hands by 12:15 the next day. I needed to be.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah, but it proves I'm not the only one who's been bitten like that. And I mean, yeah, it's made me a consumer as well, all this. But I only buy things when I want them. I don't buy things because, I just feel like filling the space behind me, if you see what I mean.
I think that's the difference, isn't it? If you're doing it out of genuine choice, it's one thing, but I think people, they buy so much and then regret it afterwards.
It's the buy remorse thing, isn't it, for a lot of people? My daughter's guilty of this. She'll buy 2 dresses and send one back. If you went into the shop, you try it on in the changing rooms, you'd change it there and then for the one that fits you and suits you, and walk out with it in a bag and you're done. But, she'll think nothing of ordering a 10 and a 12 or a 12 and a 14 or however sizes work these days, because everyone moans that the sizes don't work anymore. I mean, I don't know if it's, the way they do make the clothes, or if we've all, jokingly put weight on and we don't like admitting it.
Maybe we're afraid of admitting that we have. So
yeah, I think I'm guilty of it. Anyway, Alban, you were saying you would treat us to a Thomas Hardy birthday celebration. How old was he then?
181.
181.
Born in 1840, which is good for non-mathematicians like myself, because 1840, if you've got 40 on the end, it's quite easy to do the sums. So it is even older than Andrew, which is amazing, isn't it?
Everyone's older than me, mate. You're about the youngest one here.
Yeah.
You might look it, but
yeah.
It's all polyfiller and shelf brackets.
I'm sure it is, but I was enjoying listening to the music. I mean, as a non-musician as well as a non-mathematician, it's magic to me. In my next life, I'm going to be a musician. I can't even play a CD player. Never mind get that beautiful tones out of the guitar. And I think it was T.S. Eliot said that poetry can communicate before it's understood. And I think it's true of the lyrics of David and Andrew, and that beautiful guitar music. I mean, it sort of moved my soul. But
one day, Alban, when you can make it back up north, Andy's planning. I think October, is it, Andy, or November? We're doing a charity thing, aren't we, with musicians?
Ah,
well, this is where all of you are invited. It's that we're going to do this in honor of our friend Ian in the hall, and also because there's a community of people. It's funny because we don't really have a physical connection in that we don't live in the same street, and maybe I think in some ways, although in other ways maybe not, the connection that Zoom's given us means that we see people and hear from people that maybe we wouldn't always meet in the street. So it does have that advantage. It's a little bit detached in a way, but it's all we have.
It's only connecting, even if it's once removed. But there's nothing like live music, is there, to really feel something and to engage with people, I find. So I can't wait for the day.
It's definitely an experience you can't do anywhere else when you're in the middle of some concerts, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there was an experience we had. It was December last year. Do you remember this, Dave? A couple of days before Christmas Eve, myself and John Hall met up because he was helping me out on a radio program on Liverpool Live, Liverpool Radio, or Liverpool Live. And we were on John Jessup's show on a Tuesday afternoon. And I kept on ringing Dave, but obviously he works, and I was just about to retire. And I said, "Come along, we're going to go to the Baltic Fleet pub," and we took the guitars in. And then all of a sudden, it was a case of, I thought, well, what if someone complains? Because at that time, you could only go in a pub and buy a pint if you ordered a meal, right? So we ordered Scouse because they'd already thought of that. And Scouse was more expensive than a beer, Dave, wasn't it? But we ended up playing the guitar for these people in the pub. And it was like that you could see the relief on people's faces. That it was like we were sitting down playing the guitar and playing like pretty much all the old favourites. And the only one who hadn't brought a guitar was Dave. And I just said, "Here, put it in your hands," because all of a sudden you see a smile spreading across his features. And it was like free at last. It was a lovely feeling for him. It was a lovely feeling just trying to win the pub. And recently we got together in Vulcan Studios to do a practice and then to do a recording some weeks later. And it was the same feeling. It's like, this is where all our mates have been, it's like, we had a great time doing it. And we intend to do more. But it was like, it was hard won trying to get to that point. And then you've still got to gel your hands and wear a mask and all that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, I can show you one of the masks I had made for the occasion, which I never used. Ready for this? Can you see it?
See it. I can't see what it says.
Love it.
Space available for
Are you
hire.
getting them printed for us all, Andy?
I might do.
Very
What
good.
do you reckon?
Yeah.
I quite like it.
What would Thomas Hardy have made of COVID-19 then, Alban, dare I ask?
Well, I'm sure he would have written a poem about it. You're probably afraid of or fed up of hearing me talk about Thomas Hardy.
No, not at all.
It is actually his birthday, and he is compensating for the lack of football down here in Dorset. And this weekend, I've been out with the Thomas Hardy Society doing a walk and done a lecture, and then listening to some live musicians, which was good.
Oh, lovely.
And then yesterday, I was out walking around Dorchester, and I've got a part in the new Hardy players that I'm a member of are putting on the Mayor of Casterbridge in October. So I've been rehearsing my lines for that as well. And we went and did some filming of that on Friday, I think it was.
Are you doing it with a live audience? So is that the plan?
In October, if all goes well, it'll be in Casterbridge itself in Dorchester. But in the meantime, we're doing some filming so that we can play bits of it in the theatre.
That's pretty cool.
Sounds cool.
But Thomas Hardy, of course, he's known for his miserable poetry and his miserable novels, which for a Blackpool supporter goes down really well, I think, because I know what suffering is. But this is a very short poem, if I can share with you, as it's his birthday, or it was on the 2nd. And it's the story of it. He's sat there in Maxgate, his house in Dorchester that he built himself, and it's very ugly. And he's trying to write a poem. And the window's open. It's actually set in, it's called An August Midnight. And the window's open, and he can't write. And in through the window, there comes a Dumbledore. Now, a Dumbledore in Dorset is a bumblebee. And J.K. Rowling actually read this poem and said, "Oh, I'll nick that," or whatever J.K. Rowling sounds like. So that's why there's Dumbledore in Harry Potter novels.
What was that, Zoe?
That's interesting. Didn't realise that.
Yeah. So it's stolen from Thomas Hardy. Anyway, it's a very short poem. It's called An August Midnight. And you've got to imagine it's a very hot day or a very hot evening. The window's open. He can't write, and he's looking for inspiration. So you poets or songwriters will identify with this. A shaded lamp and a waving blind, and the beat of a clock from a distant floor. On this scene enter, winged, horned, and spined, a Longlegs, a moth, and a Dumbledore. While mid my page there idly stands a sleepy fly that rubs its hands. Thus meet we five in this still place, at this point in time, at this point in space. My guests besmear my new penned line, or bang at the lamp and fall supine. God's humblest they, I muse, yet why? They know earth's secrets that know not I.
That's great.
Yeah.
Isn't it so, again, like Andy's song about the watercolor, such a simple, obvious thing. It's just how it connects, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's brilliant, that.
I think that's simple. It's not.
We like your Dumbledore pronunciation. That made it, you know. when you do in the Casterbridge and such, like, do you actually try and do it in Dorsetese, or do you just do it in your normal voice type thing?
I've got 3 parts in this play. 3 minor roles. The first one, I'm the auctioneer who sells the wife, and that's the one where I'm going to do my best pirate, and I. Yeah. I be. Who be the auctioneer? I be. Oh, give me a guinea. Something like that.
Oh, you've got it nailed there.
Very Exeter. I be Exeter too, boy.
So, if you can speak pirate, you can speak Dorset.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right, listen, guys, I'm going to stop us recording.